Today we are weathering stonework, making some speed signs, and a big decision. Hi everyone, I'm Martin and welcome back to Donnington Castle Model Railway and welcome to another episode of Track Talk. And as usual in this episode we're going to be looking at a wide range of topics. So we're going to be doing a little bit of scenic work. I've got a project for the laser cutter to talk about. And then I've got a little bit of a quandary with the retaining wall with a couple of options that I'm thinking about. That'd be great to get some of your thoughts on. So please stick around and hopefully you'll find something of interest to you in today's episode. Before we go any further, I just want to say a public thank you to Pete, Chris, and the whole Railnuts team. Came back from work the other day and in the post there was this amazing badge that you can see on screen now. Commemorating the time spent volunteering at the NEC with Pete's layout. So I just wanted to say massive thank you for sending that through. There wasn't any need for them to do that, but the fact that they did, and Pete wrote a very nice letter saying thank you for all our help. So yeah, that was really nice. And on that subject, I'm going to be up in Chester again this year. So if you are going to be up there to see the trains, my plan is to be there on Bank Holiday Monday and then the day after that. So I'll be operating there. I don't think it'll be as hectic as the NEC. So if you're around, please do come along and say hello and watch some trains going around the layout. And on the subject of playing trains, I should say that on the Saturday after that, so the last Saturday in August, I'll be at the show in Andover, operating the Newbury Model Railway Club's Lambourne layout. So again, if you're around and coming along to that exhibition, please do come say hello and have a look at Lambourne. Okay, let's get stuck into our first topic today, and that's going to be a little bit of scenic work, and specifically weathering stonework. Now, many of you will have seen in my last video, I built the kind of Pico/Wills viaduct kit. And in that video, I went from the kind of the final washes to the finished viaduct with all the weathering without really showing exactly what I did. And the main reason for that is that I've never really done that before. I was expecting to make a complete mess of it, therefore didn't bother filming it. And I think actually it turned out okay. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to flip the viaduct round onto the side that probably won't be seen and just show you some of those techniques very briefly, just so you can see how I achieve those effects. And hopefully then you can maybe pick up some of those and use them yourselves. So let's get that onto the workbench and let's get going. This is the viaduct that you may have seen in the previous video, and if I spin this round, you'll see that the other side has not been weathered in the same way. So this is what it looked like just after the washes. So what I'll do is I'll have a go with some of the techniques that I used on the other side just to show you. A few things I'm going to use. I've got some Humbrol whitewash. I've got some Tamiya Weathering Masters A and B, cotton buds, paintbrush. I'll also use some PVA and some fine turf, that's earth, and a bit of underbrush as well. So the first thing I'll show is just the kind of the white streaks where kind of minerals and things are kind of leaching out of the stonework. So I'm just dipping the paintbrush in and then trying to get as much as possible off it. And then the way I do this one is just really add kind of quite a big blob, because this is kind of how you see them on viaducts, and then just kind of streak down a little bit. And then get a cotton bud and then just kind of really streak that down. And try and get as much of it off as possible. Actually, if you then want to just turn that down a little bit, this is a cotton bud that's previously been used with kind of black weathering powders. You can just kind of then go over it and just kind of lighten that down a little bit. Around the top sections, I just kind of, as well as kind of big kind of sections, I think it looked quite nice with just kind of little bits. So I'll just put a little tiny bit on somewhere and then just kind of try not to make it look too kind of ordered. And again, just using the cotton bud to just kind of really get rid of a lot of it. Sometimes just get into the cracks a little bit. There we go. And then again, we can just come over the top just to dull it down a little bit. So that's how I did all of the streaking. I also used a few different shades from here. So this is sand and light sand. So just again, using the brush, just to introduce a few different kind of colors. You can kind of come over the top. I have to say that I am not an expert in any way, shape or form at this. It was really just me having a play on the other side. I think it turned out quite nice. So I think that's kind of my lesson here is just have a go. Don't be afraid. Like the worst case situation is you just kind of paint over it and kind of go again, as I was almost kind of expecting to do myself. So, and then there are kind of areas where we might kind of expect to find vegetation, but also at the same time, we want to try and cover up some of the seam lines and maybe some of the bits that don't look so good from the kit. So let's kind of go in here with, this is just PVA now, where we've kind of got some, where we're going to kind of go for some kind of algae or something that's just kind of growing on the kind of wetness that's creeping out, and there's no real kind of secrets to this. Just go and get a bit of fine turf and just go over onto the glue so it sticks. Really don't need much at all. And then just kind of give it a little bit of a and then I'll just leave the PVA to dry. We can already see that that's kind of covered up a little bit of that crack there. What we don't want to do is really kind of do the same thing everywhere there's a crack, because otherwise it's going to look a bit kind of obvious that that's what we've been doing. Another thing, let's just get another bit of, let's come over this side, hopefully that's in shot. Kind of get a nice thick bit of glue on there. And then some little bits of underbrush. And then just kind of try and get them to stick onto the glue. Some of them won't. Most of them won't. As soon as I record it, everything's falling off. Again, tip it slightly. Okay, so that's a massive bit of PVA there, just to get this to stick to it. There we go. And then just kind of have a play around with some of the other colours. If you these Tamiya weathering kits are pretty good because you get 3 different colours. That means you can kind of have a blend and kind of have a play just to kind of add different shades in. Again, just kind of streaking it down. No real kind of method to it, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty much what I did. If you kind of do that over the whole thing, you kind of then end up with what I showed you in the other video, which is kind of this side, which I'm really pleased with how that looks. So, right, that's now going to go back onto the layout, and then I'm going to start landscaping around that and hopefully get that sealed in place. So I hope seeing some of those techniques were useful. We're now going to move on to a laser cut project, which is speed restriction signs. So what I'll do is I will show you in Lightburn how I've created my speed restriction signs, and then I'll get them down to the workbench and show you what they look like. I'm going to show you how I grab the images that I use for my speed restriction signs. So I'm going to use a tool called GIMP, which is a free image manipulation tool, open source. So the steps that I show you will be specific to this piece of software, but the general principles you'll be able to find in most other kind of image software, Photoshop and that kind of stuff. So what I've done to start with is found a photograph of a real speed restriction sign. So these are actually from an auction site, which is quite handy. What you want to try and find is something against as plain a background as possible, or the best, the biggest contrast between the thing that you want, i.e. the sign and the background. In this case, it's perfect because all these images are taken against a white background. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use what's known as the fuzzy select tool. And this will kind of select an area based on kind of what GIMP thinks is the object you're trying to select, which is why that kind of contrast between foreground and background is really important. In this case, it's going to be really easy. So there is a threshold tool, which you just need to kind of play around with. So if I turn the threshold right down and I try and select, you can see that it's only selected part of it because it's kind of only picking the colors very close to the one that I clicked on. Because if I take that threshold up a bit, we can then see that it uses the white background and then kind of effectively selects that entire shape, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. So a couple of steps to go. The first is I'm going to just make sure that the background is transparent. This isn't essential. It just makes life a little bit easier. So when I delete everything in the image that I don't want, rather than it being white or a plain color, it will be effectively an alpha channel of transparency. Then what I want to do is, because at the moment I've selected my item, I'm then going to do an invert. That means that everything else is selected. And then if I hit the delete key, that will then wipe out everything else. That leaves me with the image I want. If we want to, we can crop down. We've just got that. Again, that's not essential. Now what we need to do is to get this into a format that's going to work for our laser cutting. We want to export this as an SVG file. Now to do that, we need to create what's known as a path. Path is effectively turning this object or this image into a set of lines. Now what we need to do is use our select tool again to select our object and then do select to path. There'll be something similar in Photoshop for doing this. We will then see that this appears in our paths window, and you can see that it's selected that quite nicely. We have the kind of the outline as we need. We can then right click on that and do export path and save it as an SVG file. So I will go ahead and do that, and then we'll move on to the next piece of software. Next, I've come into our laser cutting software. This is Lightburn. And what I've done is I've done File, Import, and then selected the SVG, that path file that we exported from GIMP. And that's appeared here. As you can see, we've got a nice outline. That this is imported this as different line objects. So if we want to work with the whole thing, we will need to select it all. Let's Control A. Then group that, and then when we select it and move it, we'll kind of change the size of the whole thing. Now there's one thing missing off this at the moment, which is obviously the post. So I'll add that in. That's really easy to do. So what I'll do is I'll kind of do that now, and then we can figure out the scale that we want for this. So I'm just going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to very roughly at the moment just kind of draw where I think that post is going to be. We need to be mindful of what material we're going to be cutting this out on. So that's obviously much too long. But we can, again, go in here and we can then adjust that and say, we're going to cut this out on fairly thin balsa wood. So it's probably better to be a little bit longer than it is shorter, because we can always just snip the bottom off this when we've got everything the right size. You'll notice that at the moment we have kind of a join here at the moment. So what you need to do with this is you need to turn, at the moment that rectangle is a shape, we need to turn it into a path. And then I'm going to then delete that line. So we have the three sides of a rectangle, and then I'm then going to select this object which I need to ungroup. And then I can then start to delete some of these nodes. And then what I'll do is I will move them, break the shape. There we go. We have our object now. And all it's a question of doing now is just getting this the right height. So if we wanted to go for kind of 5 foot, that would be 20 millimeters, if I'm correct. There we go. So what I would do now is I would then make this suitable for, or change the layer so that it's ready for the kind of wood that I'm going to cut it out on, which would probably be on 1 mil balsa. I would cut these on. So cutting 1.6 mil balsa is fine. And then what we can do is load up our laser cutter with some balsa wood and let this go to work. We just frame it up and hit start, and that will produce us a 90 mile an hour speed limit. It's fine. So that's something that I've done for a whole range of different speeds. So let me just open that file up for you and show you what I've got. And this is my file. You can see some of the whistle boards that we looked at previously. And then I've got a range of kind of, hopefully all of the speeds that I'm going to need on the layout. Although, interestingly, looking at this, I don't have a 90, so I might just go back and save that 90 that I've just created and add it into this here. And then, yep, this file is here, and I'm able to just send this to the cutter whenever I need a sign. So I will cut a few of these, get them painted, and show you what they look like. But just one thing to note, with all of my 3D printing and laser cutting projects, I am happy to distribute the files. I do that under a Creative Commons license. I, for example, have done that with Lambourne Station. A few people contacted me, and I've been able to send those files over. So if you are ever interested in anything that I do, please do get in contact. The best way of doing that is with the email address that is linked to the channel, which is donningtoncastlemr@gmail.com. So that's in the channel information. Please just drop me a note, and I'm more than happy to package this up with, as I say, with a Creative Commons license that allows you to use it, adapt it for whatever purpose, as long as you don't then sell it. So it's basically a non-commercial license. Okay, right, let's get these made and have a look how they turn out. And these are some of the signs printed out on 1 mil balsa wood and then painted, and the back's painted black. So I will get some of those installed on the heritage line. And there we have our 25 mile an hour speed limit sign on the heritage line. I hope you enjoyed seeing how the signs are made. I'm aiming to get a few more of those out onto the layout over the next few weeks, particularly around the heritage line where the scenic work's been done. So hopefully they'll start to pop up shortly. The next topic I've got today is on the subject of the retaining wall on the heritage line. Now, on the last layout update, I mentioned that I was thinking about putting a tunnel underneath the main lines that would allow access to the kind of the yard and to the signal box from a location effectively on the other side of the lines. Now, I've done a bit of thinking about this. I'm not really happy with the idea of there being a road tunnel there. Because even though this was the 1970s, I expect that a certain amount of common sense would have prevailed, and that driving cars through onto an area that's so close to running lines is probably not going to have been allowed. So I've got a couple of options for still having a tunnel in that area, but not making it kind of with vehicle access. So let's go over to layout and have a look, and I'll show you what the couple of options I've got in mind are. And then it'd be great to get some of your thoughts on which option you think, if either, is a good idea. Our retaining wall has made it all the way around here, and in the next section, I was originally thinking about having as an arch with effectively a road running underneath it, so kind of just like that, with the idea being that then the signaller would kind of drive through that and park up in this space out front. Changed my mind, and I've got two options. So let me talk you through them both. I'll be really interested in your thoughts on which one is best. So option one is, rather than going for the full length arch section, to put a mini section in there representing what would be effectively a foot tunnel. I'd then build that back out about 6 inches, so it kind of disappears off into the darkness. And that's option number one. The second option is to go with one of the full-size arches, but have it as if it's been effectively covered up with some of that kind of wire grill. So that would kind of sit there. Maybe it was a kind of a road, I guess, underpass originally, but then people realised that it wasn't particularly safe, and kind of put that in. Hopefully you can see that that is kind of slightly transparent. So again, there'd be a kind of a tunnel back into darkness. And then on here, I'd then put a little kind of foot access door, where the kind of the signallers, when they're coming to work, are obviously kind of walking through and opening that door up. So they're my two options. There is the option to then kind of repeat or kind of alternate as the wall gets a little bit further down, as kind of potentially another bit of access into the shed that's missing there at the moment. So I'd be really interested to get your thoughts. I don't know if I've made up my mind yet, so please do let me know what you think might be the best option. Thank you in advance for all your thoughts and suggestions on that. I'm hoping I can get that part done, and then the rest of the retaining wall finished as soon as possible, because that job's really been dragging on for a long time now. It'd be good to get that finished. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If there are any topics that you'd like to see on a future episode, then please do let me know. The idea is to do kind of fairly small self-contained topics across a wide variety of areas that might not necessarily warrant a full video. So if you do have any ideas, please do let me know. There were a few that I've got in mind from suggestions that people have already made, so we'll get to those certainly at some point soon. Now, if you're not a subscriber, then there's going to be a subscribe button popping up at the end of this video, so please do consider doing that. It's easy and totally free to do. But I will see you on another video soon, so bye-bye.